March 1945, Germany. A farmhouse outside Trier. 2 American soldiers were clearing rooms. Standard procedure, door by door, room by room. The farmhouse looked empty. It wasn't. Private Roy Daniels pushed open the last door and found a man sitting at a table. Alone. No weapon in his hands. Hands flat on the wood, visible, deliberate. He'd heard them coming and made a choice. He was surrendering. German uniform. Marksman's badge. A rifle leaning against the wall behind him, far enough away to mean something. Daniels kept his weapon up. Told him not to move. The German didn't move. He was calm. The particular calm of a man who has made his decision and is finished making decisions. On the table in front of him, one thing. A small leather notebook. Dark brown, worn at the corners. He pushed it slowly toward Daniels with 2 fingers. Like he wanted it found. Daniels picked it up. He couldn't read German, but he could see what was inside. Page after page. The same format. Short entries, dates, locations, and below each entry, a few sentences. Not coordinates, not tactical notes, descriptions of people. Daniels brought the prisoner in, brought the notebook to his sergeant. His sergeant brought it to the intelligence officer. The intelligence officer read the first 3 pages with a translator, and then put it down and stared at the wall for a long time. By the following morning, the notebook was on Patton's desk. This is what was written inside. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that don't have clean answers and never pretend otherwise. The prisoner's name was Heinrich Baumann, 34 years old, from a small town outside Cologne. Former schoolteacher, like so many of the men the war had taken and turned into something else. He had been a sniper for 3 years, Eastern Front first, then France, then Germany as the lines collapsed inward. His confirmed kill count, according to his unit records, was 61. The notebook did not record 61 kills. It recorded 53. The ones he remembered clearly enough to write about. The ones that had stayed with him. Lieutenant Aaron Cole, 3rd Army Intelligence, read the notebook in full with a translator. He later wrote a detailed report of its contents, which was classified for decades and only partially released in the 1980s. What the notebook contained was this. Each entry began with a date and a location. Then a distance, the range of the shot. Then below that, a description, not of the shot, of the person. September 1942, outside Stalingrad, distance 380 meters. Young, couldn't have been more than 19. He was eating something from a tin. He looked up right before. I don't know what he saw. November 1942, same sector, distance 510 meters. Older man, moving slowly. I think his knee was bad. He favored his left side. He stopped to look at something on the ground. A bird, maybe. I couldn't see what it was from that distance. June 1944, Normandy, distance 290 meters. He was reading a letter, holding it with both hands. He just received it. I could tell by how carefully he unfolded it. I waited. I don't know why I waited. Then I didn't wait anymore. Cole read that entry 3 times. He kept reading. August 1944, France. Distance 440 meters, 2 of them together. Friends, clearly they were laughing about something. I took the one on the left. The other one stood there for almost a full second before he understood what had happened. I have thought about that second many times. Page after page, entry after entry. The man holding the photograph of his children, the man who had just lit a cigarette and was looking at the sky, the man who was young enough that his uniform still looked new, like he hadn't been wearing it long enough for it to fit him yet. Every one of them seen, observed, registered as a specific human being, and then killed. Cole put the notebook down. He looked at Baumann, who was sitting in a chair across the room, hands folded, waiting. He said, "Why did you write these down?" Bauman answered. The translator listened. He said, because I needed to remember that they were people. If I stopped remembering that, I was afraid of what I would become. Cole stared at him and he said, you kept remembering they were people and you kept pulling the trigger anyway. Bauman was quiet for a moment. Then he said, yes, that is the thing I cannot explain to you. I cannot explain it to myself. Cole wrote all of this in his report. He ended the report with a single line that was unusual for a military intelligence document. He wrote, I do not know what to do with this man or this notebook. I am sending both up the chain and asking for guidance. The notebook reached Patton the next morning. Patton read it in full, every page. He read it the way he had read Wilhelm's letters, alone, at his desk, in silence. His aide Davenport was present but knew better than to speak. Patton was not a sentimental man. He had sent men to their deaths by the thousands. He had made calculations about human lives that most people never have to make and never should have to. He was not unfamiliar with the machinery of killing, but the notebook was something different. It wasn't the killing that was different. Snipers killed. That was their function. Killing at distance, killing the unsuspecting, killing men who were eating from tins and reading letters, that was the nature of the weapon. Patton understood that. What was different was the record. The deliberate, careful human record. Most men who kill in war build a wall. A necessary wall. They stop seeing the person across the rifle because seeing the person makes the rifle impossible. It was how soldiers survived, not just physically, but mentally. You abstracted the enemy. You made them a target, a threat, a direction. You did not make them a man eating from a tin or reading a letter with both hands. Bauman had refused to build the wall. He had looked at every man he killed and written down what made him specific, what made him human. And then he had killed him anyway. Patton turned to the last page of the notebook. There was something there that Cole's report had not mentioned. A photograph, tucked into the back cover. Slightly creased, clearly handled many times, a woman and two small children, a boy and a girl, standing in front of a house somewhere in Germany. Ordinary house. Ordinary afternoon, the children squinting slightly in the sun. On the back of the photograph, in the same handwriting as the notebook, come home to us. Patton held the photograph for a long time. Then he closed the notebook and called for Cole. Cole arrived within the hour. Patton put the notebook on the desk between them. He put the photograph beside it. He said, "Tell me about him." Cole had spent 2 days with Bauman by this point. He told Patton what he knew. 34 years old, schoolteacher, conscripted 1941. No record of atrocities, no documented violations outside of combat. His kills were all military targets in active combat zones. Everything in the notebook was consistent with legitimate wartime engagement under the rules of war. Technically, Heinrich Bauman had done nothing illegal. Patton said, "Does he understand that?" Cole said, "I'm not sure he cares. I think the legal question is not the one that's keeping him up at night." Patton looked at the notebook. He said, "What is keeping him up at night?" Cole thought about how to answer that. Then he said, "I think he's been keeping that notebook because he's been trying to build a case, not against himself legally, against himself as a person. He wanted a record of what he did so that someday, somewhere, someone could look at it and tell him what it means. Whether the fact that he saw them as people counts for anything, or whether it makes it worse." Patton was quiet and he said, "What do you think?" Cole said, "I think it makes it worse and better at the same time. I think that's the most honest answer I can give you." Patton stood up. He walked to the window. The same window he always walked to when a decision was working on him. He said without turning around, "He's a prisoner of war. He'll be processed like any other prisoner of war. No special treatment, no special punishment. The notebook gets archived. The photograph goes back to him. Cole said, "The photograph, sir?" Patton turned around. His voice was even. He said, "The photograph goes back to him. It belongs to his children, not to us." Cole nodded. "Yes, sir." Patton looked at the notebook on the desk. He said, "Leave the notebook. I want to keep it for a day." He kept it for 3 days. Davenport saw it on the desk each morning and said nothing. On the 3rd evening, Patton called him in and he said, "I want you to read something." Davenport read the notebook. It took him an hour. When he finished, he set it down and looked at the general. He said, "What do I do with this, sir?" Patton said, "That's exactly the right question." Davenport waited. Patton said, "A man spent 3 years killing people and writing down their humanity in a notebook, trying to hold on to the knowledge that they were human beings even while he was eliminating them from the world. What does that tell you?" Davenport thought about it carefully. Then he said, "That he knew what he was doing was wrong and he did it anyway." Patton said, "That's one answer." Davenport said, "What's the other one?" Patton was quiet for a moment. He said, "That knowing something is wrong and being able to stop it are two entirely different things, that a man can see clearly and still be trapped. That wars don't just take bodies. They take the distance between what you know and what you do." He paused. He said, "He was trying to keep that distance visible. That's what the notebook was. Not a confession, not a justification, just a refusal to pretend the distance wasn't there." He picked up the notebook, turned it over in his hands once. He said, "I don't know if that makes him better or worse than the men who built the wall and felt nothing. I genuinely don't know. But I think it makes him honest. And honesty in the middle of a war is rarer than courage." He set the notebook down. He said, "Get it to the archive. Make sure it's preserved properly." Heinrich Baumann was processed through the standard prisoner pipeline. He spent 8 months in a camp in France before being repatriated to Germany in early 1946. The photograph was returned to him the day he left as Patton had ordered. He received it in a small envelope, his name written on the outside in English. He held the envelope for a moment before opening it. When he saw the photograph, he sat down on the nearest surface, a wooden step outside the processing building, and held it with both hands. A guard nearby watched him, asked if he was all right. Baumann looked up. He said, in the limited English he'd learned in the camp, "My children. I was not sure I would see this again." The guard nodded, said nothing else. Baumann went home to Cologne. His wife was there. His children were there. The house had been partially damaged in bombing, but the walls still stood. He did not go back to teaching immediately. He worked in construction for a year. Physical work, the kind that doesn't leave room for the other kind of thinking. Then he went back to the classroom. He taught German literature. He never taught the war directly. But every year in his literature classes he taught a unit on testimony, on the literature of witness, on why humans write things down even when, especially when. The writing changes nothing. His students remembered him as demanding and quiet, a teacher who listened more than he spoke, who asked the same question at the end of every lesson. What does it mean to see something clearly and still not be able to stop it? Write me your answer. There is no correct one. He never told them why he asked. The notebook sat in a military archive in Washington for 40 years, partially declassified in 1987. A historian who read it wrote a short paper calling it a record of moral witness, a man who saw what he was doing and wrote it down so it could not be called anything other than what it was. He ended the paper with a question he said he couldn't answer. Is a man who sees his own actions clearly more culpable than one who does not? Or is the seeing itself a form of accountability that the law cannot measure? The question remained open. It still does. Patton Patton never spoke about the notebook publicly. But Cole, in an interview given to a military historian in 1969, described the afternoon he delivered the notebook to Patton and the conversation that followed, and he said, "I've been in rooms with Patton when he was angry, when he was commanding, when he was making decisions that moved armies. I've seen every version of him." He paused. "But that afternoon in that office with that notebook on the desk between us, that was the only time I ever saw him look genuinely uncertain, not about what to do. The decision was straightforward. Prisoner of war, standard processing, photograph returned. That part was easy, uncertain about something else, something the decision couldn't resolve. He said I asked him once years later whether he ever thought about the sniper. He looked at me like I'd asked something strange. Then he said yes. He said he thought about him more than he'd expected to. I asked him why. He said, because most men in a war either feel everything and break or feel nothing and survive. That man found a third way. He felt everything and wrote it down and kept going. I don't know what to call that. I've been trying to find the word for it for 20 years. Cole shook his head slowly. I don't think he ever found the word. I'm not sure there is one. What do you think the notebook means? Does seeing clearly make a man more responsible or just more honest? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want more World War II stories, the ones that ask questions no one can fully answer, make sure you subscribe.